Hello and welcome to the Airline Weekly Lounge. I'm your host, Gordon Smith, and I'm joined, as usual, by co-host Jay Shabbat. In part one of this week's show, we're recapping a busy August, and in part two, we're taking a closer look at China. Hi, Jay, how's it going?
All right, Gordon, we're back together after a couple of weeks of not recording.
We are indeed. Thanks again to Meghna for last week, very diligently filling my not-so-big boots with a really interesting conversation. I listened to that actually on the plane home. I was in Spain, in Mallorca. It's not that long a flight, but neither is the podcast, so it was perfect. It was a bit weird listening to the podcast sort of third person, but I deeply enjoyed it. So that was great. We've got a busy episode today, Jay. We're going to be looking particularly around some developments that were happening down under Australia and a bit of New Zealand in August whilst we were away. And then part two, we're looking at things in China. But there are some other stories floating around, not least what's happening at Spirit Airlines. So you and Meghna last week were looking at, I think the title of the episode was Can It Survive? We've had developments even since then with a second bankruptcy. Just update our listeners if they're not quite familiar with the latest. What's going on at Spirit?
Sure. So we are talking on Tuesday, September 2nd, day after the Labor Day holiday here in the States. And on Friday, right before the 3-day weekend, Spirit filed for bankruptcy the second time within a year. So clearly their first bankruptcy didn't work as planned. That bankruptcy was designed to be kind of a quick in and out, let's get our financial obligations in order, but we're not really going to mess with our operational costs. We're not going to restructure any contracts or anything like that on the operational side. This one, unfortunately, is going to have to be different. In order for Spirit to stay alive, they're going to have to probably dramatically reduce their costs. And that entails some unfortunate and unpleasant things like renegotiating labor contracts in all likelihood, perhaps renegotiating aircraft contracts. Now, of course, you have to consider that this is a very tight market for aircraft right now. So it's not as if aircraft lessors are going to be in a, very, uh, very, very inclined to offer Spirit a lot of concessions here. And even the labor market is not quite as tight as it was, let's say, 2 years ago. But if you think about pilots and flight attendants, there's no guarantee that they'd be willing to to provide the concessions that Spirit will likely ask for. Hopefully, or we'll see. Maybe it doesn't even come to that. Maybe the Spirit finds a new partner, and they were able to sell themselves to Frontier as the obvious candidate. But at this point, it's they're in a very precarious position. Our friends at Spirit, so we wish them well, and we'll be watching to see if a they survive, and b if they do survive, if they're able to get back to some semblance of profitability. So that's your Spirit update.
Thanks, Jay. And yeah, I would like to extend my thoughts as well to everyone involved. At this time, it is a period of uncertainty. And as Jay says, it's not completely clean cut as to how it's going to turn out, but we wish everyone involved all the best. Nobody likes to see a bankruptcy of any kind in the industry, Jay. But was this some sort of pina colada based hallucination? Or was I reading something from you last week that said, actually, you can have two bankruptcies and still come out kind of okay? Were you drawing parallels? Was it US Airways, sort of 20 odd years ago, that had a double bankruptcy and still managed to work things out, albeit with a merger at the end of it?
Yeah, we called that the Chapter 22 bankruptcy, Chapter 11 twice. So, yeah, and it's in that case, U.S. Airways filed. I can't remember the exact dates. It wasn't long after I was working at U.S. Airways, but I promise you, Gordon, it wasn't my fault that they
Nothing to
went
do with
bankrupt.
you.
Nothing to do with me. Maybe because I left, that's why they went
There we
bankrupt. I hadn't
go.
thought of
That
that,
was
but
it. Put that on your CV. Causation or
right.
correlation.
Yeah. But to the more serious point, you're
Yes.
right that they did file twice. And the second time they wound up getting purchased by America West, which was a smaller airline. America West purchased them in bankruptcy. And in the end, it turned out to be a pretty happy story because America West went on to, which kept the U.S. Airways name, went on to be to merge with American, and that's American is obviously with us still today. So there was no ultimate collapse there for U.S. Airways, and perhaps Spirit will follow that same path.
We'll be keeping a very close eye on all things Spirit related, both on the podcast, but also in our weekly newsletter. I always call it a newsletter, and I always say we need to find a better name for it, but let's just call it a newsletter for shorthand. Jay, thanks for the update. And yeah, keep an eye on Skift and Airline Weekly for the latest there. Let's turn our attention now to all things Qantas, because they put out some very interesting numbers, Jay. They don't do quarterly, they do half yearly reporting. Is that correct?
That's right. Yeah. So they don't do the quarterly, the full quarterly earnings releases. They do every 6 months, and their fiscal year is a little strange. It actually starts in July, but we'll make it simple here. I'm going to refer to when I say first half, second half. I'm referring to the calendar year. So during the first half of calendar year 2025, again January to June, we're talking about here. Qantas had another really good year, and it's been like that. Let's put COVID, the 2 or 3 years around COVID aside. Qantas has really been one of the world's most profitable, big global airlines for quite a number of years now. And just to give you the exact number, they reported a 10% operating margin for the first half, calendar first half. And if I may, I'll just briefly break that down. It's nice. They offer quite a bit of detail for each of their business units. So their Qantas domestic unit, which includes their regional service too. They do a lot of charters for mining companies and whatnot. But their let's call it Qantas branded, the mainline domestic service, that had an 11% operating margin. Actually, if you want to just get real fine detail here. The total group operating margins is 9.7. Domestic alone was 11.3. So as usual, Qantas domestic, they tend to do rather well. It is largely a duopoly in Australia. They have a lot of markets either to themselves or basically shared with Virgin Australia. So that tends to be a very high margin operation. Now, Qantas Mainline International, that tends to be the lowest margin activity, but it's still not doing bad. They had a positive 6% operating margin the first half. So nothing to be ashamed about. That is a much more competitive market than domestic. You can picture all the foreign carriers flying to Australia, but they have a nice business, particularly. They always call out their business to the United States, which over the past couple of years has done very well. They cooperate very closely with American, joint business with them, and the American passenger, the U.S. originating passenger flying on business, but even more importantly, on vacation to Australia. A lot of that business has been filtering up to premium seats, so that's been nice for them. So that's 6% there in that business. Then they have Jetstar, which both domestic and international, and that was the real superstar of the show this year, and they had a 12% operating margin. So right in line with the group margin there, and yeah, Jetstar, I think they've just done really well, both domestically and internationally, but just a lot of you know kind of price sensitive holiday demand that they've been able to pick up. Again, a lot of their markets are either duopolistic or even in some cases they're the only game in town, and so that's been a really good business for them. And then what really kind of lifts the group total is their loyalty program, which had a 20% margin. It's smaller. It's smaller, but it's not small. I mean, it's almost $1 billion in revenue, US dollars in revenue over the first half. So not small, but a nice cash cow for them. So that yeah, I think that covers the different business units for Qantas in the first half. All told, it's been yeah, real nice story.
You mentioned Virgin Australia there, and yeah, duopoly, whatever you want to call it, they're doing very nicely there. Regular listeners and readers will remember Bain Capital got involved and saw some promise in the airline, and it looks like their risk, their bet, or their informed decision, depending on your point of view, paid off. Jay, Virgin Australia putting up some decent numbers as well.
Yeah, they did, and they actually outperformed Qantas, which is really a big leap for them. Virgin Australia, if you'll recall, had yeah, good 10 years where they were really struggling to earn decent margins, and then they were forced into bankruptcy during COVID, very early on during COVID, and then as you mentioned, Bain Capital invested, and they wound up with an 11% operating margin during the first half of this year. So, very nice nice turnaround there. Qatar Airways actually bought about a quarter of the airline. They did an IPO, so now the public owns a percentage, and Bain Capital retained a stake as well. So again, yeah, here just like Qantas, a good news story. Both of these carriers, by the way, I should say, Qantas and Virgin Australia, said demand even going into the calendar second half of the year remains pretty strong. So should be more of the same in the months and quarters ahead.
And some interesting fleet developments as well for both Virgin Australia and for Qantas and Jetstar, the various other subsidiaries there, getting the LRs, the XLRs in the case of Qantas mainline, and some developments as well on the E2s going into Virgin Australia. But it looks, Jay, like Virgin Australia has sort of learned the lessons of its past, its relatively recent past, and not trying to be that airline doing everything to everyone, taking the 777s to Los Angeles, doing the regional stuff out in Western Australia, doing some of the domestic trunk routes as well. They seem a little bit more disciplined this time round, and it seems to be paying dividends.
Yeah, that's exactly right, and they said they're now focused on basically 3 key segments, and this is their own terms here. 1, smart business travelers, 2, value corporate travelers, and 3, premium leisure travelers. So, yeah, there was a time when it was really going after everybody. They were, flying 777s out to, the United States. They were, having these really fancy lounge for the big time corporate players, and they're not, they're as you said, they're narrowing their focus, and I think that makes a lot of sense for them. Now, the one downside of that is Australia is a relatively small market, so it's at some point it becomes hard to grow the airline, and it sounds like what they're trying to do is focus more of their revenue growth on the loyalty program, and then maybe to a lesser extent their regional airline. It's called Vara, VARA. That focuses on some of the mining business, the charters out to Western Australia and things like that, Queensland. So they don't anticipate being able to grow the core airline, the main line, Virgin Australia, all that much. They maybe a couple percent over the next couple of years. I think there looks like in the second half, the July to December half of this year, they plan on growing ASK capacity by about 4%. And some of that growth is actually coming from aircraft densification. They're adding an extra row of seats to their 737s. So yeah, that's my point being it's don't expect a whole ton of growth in the years ahead for this airline. They will be getting you did mention fleet, Gordon. They will be getting more Max 8s, and then eventually not for a couple years, but they will be getting the larger Max 10s as well. So that'll help with growth.
Some interesting developments there, Jay. And before anyone of them runs down to Australia and says, "Wow, looks like everything's going great in the southern hemisphere. Bye, bye, bye." It's not a universally happy story in the Antipodes, as some of my British counterparts would know it as, because Air New Zealand has been struggling. We've got issues with fleet. We've got issues with demand. We've got issues with lots of US capacity coming in there, Jay. We've got the outgoing CEO, Greg Fornan, who made some comments in the past couple of weeks or so about the company that he's handing over to. Is it this chief digital officer that's taking over?
Oh, that sounds right. Yeah,
Yeah,
chief, yeah, definitely in the
quite
IT
a jump.
side. Yep, yep. Yeah, unusual, right? Like, yeah, Nikhil Ravi Shankar. Apologies if I didn't get the name right, but yeah, not every day that you see someone from the digital slash IT realm get elevated to the chief executive role. But there you have it.
Especially without going to CEO or president first, quite a low. So, congratulations there. But yeah, Jay, Greg Fornan, he's handing over a company. He started February 2020, such a rough time to start. And then obviously we had engine issues and all sorts of other external factors as well as some internal headwinds as well, Jay. But what's the picture? What is the outlook at Air New Zealand? Because we got some detail from them as well recently.
Right, and you hit on the key challenges they have, first and foremost, the fleet groundings. If you add the 787s that have engine issues and then also the 320 neos that have issues, that's about 20% of their fleet grounded at any given time. So, it's just impossible. What happens when you can't, when you have that much of your fleet grounded? How do you plan for that? I mean, how do you properly staff? I mean, you hire all these pilots and flight attendants and mechanics, thinking that, oh, we're going to fly this many ASKs. And then suddenly, a fifth of your airline is on the ground and you're overstaffed. And, just a whole bunch of stuff like that. How do you, get efficiencies through growth? How do you get efficiencies through all sorts of, you know, aspects of running the business? So it's very, very difficult situation for them. You got to feel for them. You also mentioned, Gordon, and I'm glad you did, is that there are some demand issues in New Zealand that didn't come up for Qantas and Australia, Virgin Australia, and on the other side of Tasman there. They did mention that there's, government travel's been weak, a few other segments. Yeah, it is a little dicey picture for Air New Zealand. Much not nearly quite as happy a picture as we find on the other side of the Tasman Sea. And their operating margin, by the way, for the first 6 months of this year, just 1%. Barely made money at the operating level.
Ouch. Okay. Thanks for the update there, Jay. A fairly whistle stop tour of the Trans Tasman area, but yeah, we'll be keeping an eye on both Qantas and Air New Zealand, and to a less extent, Virgin Australia and the others in the newsletter. But let's get into the break because we've got a busy part two as well. We're taking a look at China. But before that, a quick reminder send any questions or comments that you might have for us to podcasts@skift.com. That's podcasts with an S at the end. And please don't forget to follow or subscribe to the podcast wherever you're listening or watching. And if you are enjoying the show, please rate us 5 stars or leave us a positive review so we can continue to spread the word about the Airline Weekly Lounge. Don't go anywhere. We'll be right back.
Hey, everybody, I'm Sarah Kopit, editor in chief at Skift, and I've got to be honest with you, I am just blown away by how fast our industry is changing. AI is transforming how people book, platforms are flipping business models and consumer behavior. It is more unpredictable than ever. And that's why I am so excited for this year's Skift Global Forum happening September 16th through 18th in New York City. This year's theme jumps into the future, Travel 2030, people, platforms, and new paths forward. You'll hear from leaders at Booking Holdings, IHG, AirAsia, plus dozens more shaping the future of travel. And this year, we've got more than just stage talks. We've got expert-guided roundtables and new networking formats designed to spark real conversation so you can do real business. Expect it to be more interactive, more personal, and more valuable than ever. Join me and the rest of the industry at Skift Global Forum. Use the code PODCASTS for $800 off the full price at live.skift.com. Hope to see you there.
Hello and welcome back to the Airline Weekly Lounge. I'm Gordon Smith, joined as usual by co-host Jay Shabbat. Part one, we were discussing Spirit and things in Australia and New Zealand. We're turning our attention now to China, Jay, because if we ignore the half-yearly cycle that Qantas offers, we do get quarterly numbers usually out of the Chinese carriers, although they are usually slightly late to the point where we're almost sort of starting on the next quarter by the time we get the last of the previous quarters from the Chinese carriers. But they've been relatively prompt this year, considering some of their previous efforts. What do our listeners need to know about what's happening in China, Jay?
Yes, so we do have the numbers now, and the crack Airline Weekly team has been crunching the numbers. That team would be me, but the yeah, I no assistance, maybe someday, but yes, I've got the numbers here for all of you to enjoy, and I will share them now. So Air China, which was the strongest of China's big three back before the pandemic, is now pretty consistently losing money. In the second quarter, they had another loss, negative, and this is just operating here, -2% operating loss. And Air China is based in Beijing. China Eastern, which is based in Shanghai, was always kind of the airline that performed worst among the big three. And that unfortunate distinction remains true today. -3% for the second quarter. Now, China Southern, which wasn't quite as good as Air China or as successful as Air China before the pandemic, has now been consistently a little bit better than the other two. They did make money again in the second quarter, but just with a 2.5% operating margin. So these airlines are still struggling, and if you want to know why, you'll have to stay tuned for the upcoming issue of Airline Weekly. I'm going to leave all of you in suspense, but I will give you a couple of hints here. So one is that the international market out of into and out of China, and we're just talking mainland China here, been still it's still a lot smaller than it was before COVID. And I'm going to give you some actually a few numbers here that I think you will find rather rather I don't know, stunning too strong a word, but let me tell you that this is using Cirium Dio capacity data. So flights or sorry seats, the number of seats flown into and out of China since for the third quarter, so this current quarter, if you compare that to the same quarter of 2019 pre-COVID, we're up 11%. So the market is bigger today than the Chinese market is bigger today than it was pre-COVID. Okay, but the domestic market is 18% larger. The international market is 16% smaller. So you can see there has been really not much of a recovery. I also ran the numbers just for longer haul international routes, so routes more than 3,000 miles. I'm not sure what that is in kilometers, but um, it's in any case, just think of, very long oceanic route, transoceanic routes. The seats there are down 19%. So we're still about a fifth smaller there than in 2019. And then I kind of looked at country by country, and there are some countries where the market hasn't contracted. Japan is now the single largest foreign market for Chinese for coming into and out of China, and that market is actually up about 4% in seats from 2019. Again, we're looking at just third quarter here. But then you start looking at South Korea down 7%. Hong Kong, which is treated, we could treat that sort of separately. That's down 10%. The Thai market, Thailand, down almost 50%. So that's a big one.
Five
That's been
zero.
50. That's been
Wow.
trouble for some of the Thai carriers as well. And for the Thai economy, frankly, they haven't been getting the same levels of Chinese tourism that they were, 6, 7 years ago.
For
So
sure, Jay.
Thailand's down. Hmm.
I was just going to interject there and say, if
Yeah.
anyone's interested in that topic, Peyton Bhutia, our Asia editor, she's been doing some fantastic reporting on the demand flows between China and Thailand. Really, really fascinating stuff. Check it out, skiff.com.
Yeah, and then some. Apparently, a lot of Chinese tourists are still going to Singapore, Malaysia, Vietnam, because those markets are up quite a lot. I mean, 17%, 27%, 18%, respectively. But then you get into the cross strait market that's between the mainland and Taiwan. That's also about 50% smaller than it was pre-COVID. The UK is interestingly up. That's up about almost 40%. And then, yeah, Indonesia down 30%, Cambodia down 55%. Germany down 30%. So it's kind of all over the place, but in the aggregate, it's down a lot. And then there are certain markets like India, which they're right now, I think this is going to change, but right now there's flights don't even exist anymore between India and China. So that's contributing to the decline. The United States is actually down 71%. Some of that, and this is particularly true for United States and Europe, some of that has to do with the Russia-Ukraine conflict, the fact that Russian airspace is closed to European and North American carriers, but not closed to the Chinese carriers. That's made that market somewhat difficult for flight rates and whatnot. But some of these markets are just, yeah, a shadow of their former selves.
And just to clarify that last point, Jake, 'cause I think that was really interesting. We're not speaking just about Chinese carriers outbound from China. This is anyone. So this could be British Airways coming in to Shanghai or not, as the case may be, Virgin Atlantic or any of the US carriers, for example.
Right, right. And some of the Chinese airlines themselves, like we were talking about the big three, some of them are bigger today internationally than they were pre-COVID. Not a lot, but they're it's kind of mixed. I want to say China Eastern is up, but maybe Air China down. I can't remember exactly. Stay tuned for our feature story, and we'll have more detail on that. But it is, yeah, a lot of this is reflected in the declines in the actual foreign airlines flying to China. So if you think about, I mean, you could name quite a few that have left China entirely. I
Qantas.
think Qantas is a good one.
Yeah,
Yeah,
they're
like
still going into Hong Kong, but yeah, Cam Wallace, the Qantas International CEO, he said getting out of mainland China was the right move because, frankly, there were more profitable markets elsewhere. But interestingly, without getting on a really long tangent, lots of capacity from Chinese carriers going down into Australia. So people are still clearly wanting to travel between the two countries, but not necessarily on Qantas metal.
Yep, yep. And then if you think about, Lufthansa, Air Canada, United, Finnair, all these US and or North, let's say North American and European carriers, just as I mentioned before, just flying a lot less to China than they used to. And thanks for that qualification. Therefore, that it were when I mentioned those country numbers, those were for all airlines, not just the Chinese airlines.
Got it. Thanks, Jay. And as Jay says, lots more detail on China and the latest developments there in the next issue of Airline Weekly, hitting your inboxes on Monday, the 8th of September. Jay, before we go, I just want to give a final shout out to the Skift Global Forum because we're just 2 weeks away, actually. We're recording here on the 2nd of September. That kicks off in New York City just a couple of weeks' time. And we've got Tony Fernandez due to join us from AirAsia. We've also got Barry Biffle, CEO of Frontier Airlines, due to join us, plus a load more from the broader travel sector, Booking.com, Expedia, Royal Caribbean. I know the programming team are diligently putting that together. It's not too late to get your ticket, but you don't have much longer to secure your spot. Go to live.skift.com. And if you're keen to join us for an event that is pure aviation, look no further than the Skift Aviation Forum. We're going to be back in Texas, Fort Worth to be precise. And our first round of speakers have been announced for the Skift Aviation Forum. Delighted to say we're going to be joined by Johnny Garrity, the CEO of JetBlue, David Neilman, who needs no introduction, but I'll say NOI CEO of Breeze, founder of Azul, JetBlue, and others, and Tom Doxey, the EVP and Chief Financial Officer at Southwest Airlines, and with Chris McLaughlin, the CEO of DFW Airport, Eric Tanner from Flair Airlines, really interesting Canadian carrier, low-cost carrier there, the CCO, and Damien Fush, the Chief Commercial Officer of Agoda. That is just the first round of speakers. Lots more big names to come. Go to live.skift.com/Skift Aviation Forum for all the details there. And if you are an Airline Weekly subscriber, you get a free in-person ticket to the Skift Aviation Forum. So what's not to love, Jay?
It sounds like a great event to me. I'm looking forward to it.
I'm looking forward to it too. Always a pleasure. Thanks for that, Jay. Really interesting tour of the Asia Pacific region there. And if you've got any more questions or comments for us about the podcast, or maybe a subject that you want us to discuss in a future episode, podcast@skift.com. That's podcast with an S at the end. Thanks to Jay for joining me this week. And thanks as always to our producers, Monica and Will, wherever you are in the world. Thanks for listening, and we'll catch you next time. Bye for now. Whether you're listening to us on Spotify, Apple, or wherever you get your podcasts, please make sure to subscribe, rate us 5 stars, or leave us a positive review. This really helps us get the word out about the Airline Weekly Lounge, so we can continue to bring you this podcast every week, absolutely free of charge. And if you're watching us on YouTube, make sure to subscribe to the Skift channel and hit the notification bell to find out whenever a new video drops.